Hello, welcome to the Fairy Whispering podcast. I'm Claire Casely, and I've got an amazing guest for you today, Morgan Knudsen, who is a paranormal researcher, TV host, award-winning educator, executive producer, author, writer for UK Haunted Magazine, paranormal and cryptozoology researcher, host of Supernatural Circumstances podcast, and inspirational speaker. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm really interested in your paranormal heritage to start with, because I was reading about your grandfather and your information that you have about your bio, and how I'm just wondering if he is an inspiration for you in what you're doing now, working with the paranormal. Do you feel like he is a bit of a guide for you?
Oh yeah, I think so. It's so interesting how the world of non-physical kind of bleeds into what you're doing if you're aware of it. And so absolutely. I mean, there was stuff that I didn't know about that side of the family history until much later in my own research. And it was really neat to me because it seemed like our research was really going down the same path. And where A.D. Watson kind of left off, where he was, working with the idea that non-physical energies are about joy and about you connecting with yourself and connecting with all that is. And he was kind of going down this path that was very different than a lot of people at the time, which was like the early 1900s. And he got a lot of criticism for that because he wasn't doing the spooky, scary seance, freaking people out. He wasn't doing those things, and the messages that he was getting through the channeler that he was using were just the complete opposite. It was just empowering, and here's how we can connect with these energies. And so it was interesting for me because I myself and my business partner Stephanie Wirtz, like she and we began our own research before we ever knew about him, and we were going down that same path, and we were like, no, this is what we have to do. So I think the guidance was there very early. I think there's that connection, from non-physical. I really feel like he sort of saw this opportunity from where he is, from his vantage point, and was like, here's a way we can keep this going. So it's really cool. And yeah, I mean, you can't help but feel like influenced.
Amazing. And so I was watching one of your videos where you're talking about, it's one of your spiritual health, paranormal health. Sorry, I've forgotten the title, but it's all about being healthy and talking about the
Yes.
paranormal, and what you were saying about organ transplants and people inheriting memory. And so it sounds like what you're saying is a similar thing, that from our ancestors we're inheriting those interests and that.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know whether it's necessarily like you're inheriting them, but I think when you've got somebody who was that passionate, I think that energy is kind of hard to it's hard to not be a part of that. And I mean, I could have gone in a pile of different directions. Like, I love to draw, I love to, I'm an artist, I love theater, I love and all of those things. But this was the thing, and it was such a draw. And I know I'm not the only one. When I wrote my book The Gift of Instinct, that was the one thing that I noticed, that throughout history, even the giants of parapsychology, every single one of them had this calling. And my great grandfather, he was no different than them. But there was, everywhere, everybody from J.B. Ryan to Eileen Garrett to all of these different people. Once they kind of got a bead on this world of non-physical, immediately they were just like, this is what I got to do. Like J.B. Ryan, who of course founded the Ryan Institute, it was so interesting with him because he was a botanist, and he had this like tenured job, and he was going along just being professor. He was doing some pretty great things, and then he ended up going to a lecture of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which, for everybody that doesn't know this, he's the author of Sherlock Holmes and whatnot. But Conan Doyle was really, really big into spiritism and these ideas. And J.B. Ryan sat down in this lecture. He listened to him for like an hour, and he was like, I need to quit my job. This is what I want to do. And he went home and he told his wife Louisa, and he's like, I got to quit my job. I'm ditching this university job. I'm going back to school. He put himself back through school for psychology at Harvard. I think it was Harvard. And then he ended up going right back into university studies and stuff like that. And lo and behold, now we have the Ryan Institute. But it's interesting because it's like that sort of calling is just present through, I think, everybody that gets into this, which is sort of the point that I was trying to make.
Definitely. I was talking to somebody earlier, another guest, and we were talking about our old lives, and suddenly, ended up being on a fairy path. But I'm interested in all types of paranormal phenomena, but mainly fairies. And so I'm wondering what your old life and your transition into this life, how did that come about? Was it just a natural process, or did you have to quit a job?
Yeah. Yeah, it was totally natural. There was events that started to go on around the family where there was some paranormal events that were going on in the house, and I was really fascinated by that. But I also was really fortunate to grow up in an era where the people that were around in terms of resources were really solid investigators, like Lloyd Auerbach, Carrie Gaynor, people that you didn't get the sort of ghost hunty, flashy media shows on TV back then. It was all researched and presented. Linda Moulton Howell's show Sightings was really big at that point, where it was presented very journalistically. So for me, it was like all this stuff started to happen, what you're taught your whole life shouldn't be happening, right? You're always told as a kid, oh, ghosts don't exist, that's silly, don't do, that's all silly stuff. And then you start realizing that it's like, no, there are people, learned people in the world, in some of the best universities on the planet, that are doing this. And you realize, no, there is magic. There is magic in the world. It doesn't necessarily look like what you think it will, but there is, and there's a lot to be discovered. So it's just the idea of, I think, realizing that, there's magic going on and we are a part of that. It's intoxicating. I mean, how can you not want to be a part of that,
It is really, really fascinating. That's why I'm doing this, because it just draws you in, doesn't it? And one of the things that I'm researching at the moment, you might probably have some knowledge about this, is vanishing cottages, which kind of has there's a few of them on I live near Dartmoor, Morgan, which is like only a few miles from where I live. And there's loads of paranormal phenomena connected with Dartmoor, including the black dogs that Sir Arthur Conan
the black shuck.
The black shuck.
Absolutely.
Which crosses over into your cryptozoology research, obviously. And so there are these vanishing cottages in various places that people actually have interactions with the inhabitants sometimes. And, they go and knock on the door and speak to somebody in the cottage, and then they go back a few days later and the cottage isn't there. It's just a pile of rubble.
Yeah.
I find that so amazing that, these things, these other realities are out there. And
yeah, absolutely.
So if that can exist, then fairies can exist. And I mean, in your paranormal work, do you have any crossovers with fairy beings? Have you ever come across anything?
Yeah, it's interesting that you kind of bring that up, because I think you touched on the idea of these kind of other realities, and that's definitely something that over my career, especially over the last, I'd say, number of years, that I've really watched unfold. And the interesting, the missing cottages, missing properties, that's here in the West as well. Like, people will report these, farmhouses or something like that are going missing. I remember back a number of years ago, the singer Marilyn Manson, actually, he had an experience when he was a kid where he was at this farm, he was in this farmhouse property, and he and a friend ended up going into the woods and discovered this house. And he went down into the basement of this house. They were in the, like, all over this house and whatnot. And he said, nothing felt right. He's like, nothing felt right. He's like, I just wanted to go home. And he left the house and whatnot. And the next morning, he sort of got his courage back up, and he's like, I'm just going to go out and I'm just going to peek. I want to see what's there. And the only thing that was there was a foundation. There was no home. Everything was gone. And it was interesting to hear, like, his perception on that as well, because he was saying the same thing. It's like everything's existing on these different frequencies. And it's like when you're tuning into that frequency, all of a sudden, this other world kind of opens up in front of you that maybe wasn't there before. And it's really interesting. And over the years, over the different critters and stuff that I've looked at, one of the most recent ones being dogmen, it's apparent to me that something along those lines is what's going on. And I've seen some things, like, I haven't seen like fairies specifically, but I have no doubt at all that there are these creatures that people are interpreting, whether and they all have different labels. All the cultures have different labels for them, but there's these creatures and these beings that people are interpreting, and they're consistently seeing that they're there. I mean, I've seen some of these things. I've interviewed people who've seen some of these things, and once you see it, you can't deny it. You can't go back. It's not a case of mistaken identity or anything like that. This is when you see it, you see it.
Yeah, it's that people I spoke to. Funny you should mention Dogman, because behind me, I put up this picture earlier. This is one of my paintings.
And that's lovely.
This is a being that my son and I saw in some woods a few years ago. I mean, obviously my sort of artistic impression, but he was very dog-like with his ears.
Interesting.
And face. So yeah, fascinating. I was also interested in your work with fire, because that has crossovers into the elemental realm, working with fire energy. And I love the way that you use fire to demonstrate, what's possible, really. And it's such a wonderful, positive way to teach and get your message across. So you tell me a bit about how you first started working with fire and your understanding of fire.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because it came about through a number of friends of mine who were fire performers and teachers, and I really wanted to do it because I thought it was like an empowering thing to be able to learn and do and accomplish. And what I found over the years, as I was learning under these different teachers and whatnot, was that so many of the things that you have to learn really lean into areas such as meditation and things like that. Like, you have to learn breath work, you have to learn, and all of these things in fire arts are very, very crucial, because if you screw up your breath work, you're in trouble. But I noticed that there was this element of, well, wait a minute, you've got to really check your energy, your mood, your baggage at the door before you even begin to pick some of this stuff up. And that was one of the first things that I kind of noticed. And it's very similar to how I would investigate a property where there was, the paranormal phenomenon going on. Whereas just, I check myself, leave my crap at the door, and try to be in the best headspace as I possibly can. And fire was very similar. Like if you picked it up and you were in a bad mood, odds are you were going to mess up, you were going to burn yourself. Like that was literally, like, it was almost like this stuff can read the energy that you've got going. So I started to notice that, this really wasn't something that you master. This was something that you partner with. And when you understand the partner, then the partner responds to you, and you can do some pretty incredible things. And understanding the partner involves the science side of it, and understands, it's understanding the fuels you're using, it's understanding physics, thermal lag, all of those things. But it's also understanding that, you're working with an energy that's going to do its own thing. You're never going to master the fire that's there. You can experiment and play with it, and you can dance with it, you can do all these things, but at the end of the day, it's going to do its thing. So it really became apparent to me that this was a really great way to get some of the paranormal across to people that were like, oh, well, I don't believe in this, because some of the tricks and whatnot that I do look like crazy magic. It looks like an illusion or a magic trick, and none of it is a magic trick. Every single bit of it is scientifically grounded. And I don't have anything on my hands, I don't put anything in my mouth. All of it has to do with the science of the fuel, understanding the fire, understanding the physics of it. And usually what I'll do is if I've got a venue that allows it, I'll start lectures with this process with people, and immediately everybody goes, well, there's something on your hands, as you're fooling us. No, but if you were one of those people out there that were always taught, you can't touch fire, fire's hot, there's like no gray area at all, it's going to look crazy to you. In the same way that when people say, I think I saw an apparition, well, if you don't understand how some of this works, it's going to look crazy, but it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. And so when people were able to see sort of I think the physical the physical representation of that, when they were starting to get their minds blown over such a core belief that they had about something like fire, it was a lot easier than after that for them to realize, well, wait a minute, if I was wrong about such a core belief, then what does that mean for my core beliefs about everything else? And at that point, it starts to challenge a paradigm, because people have paradigms about this stuff.
Yeah, and because you were saying about, we're taught as children not to touch fire, and fire is dangerous, and all those messages.
And it's true.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And it's true. However, there's a gray area where that can change.
Yeah. Similar to our teaching from adults, if they're not open-minded adults, about the paranormal. And you're growing up, as I did, quite an open-minded child, and wanting to read about ghosts and monsters and all of these kinds of things, and adults around me thinking, oh, why are you interested in that?
Yeah, absolutely.
It can take time, can't it, to find your community, and that's what this is all about, what we do, and reaching out to people that are having these experiences. So yeah, sorry, I've lost my thread now.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, everything is like everything you bring up is, I think, is really on point. And I mean, I think when you get into these, like you say, like finding the right community and whatnot, and finding the communities that will, not only accept what you're saying, but also challenge what you're saying. And I think sometimes that's missing in a lot of these circles as well, is it's like, okay, let's challenge the notion of what this is. And it's really, really important. And I think, as we sort of move forward through the crazy of the paranormal, and as our reality sort of begins to blur a little bit with even things like the UAP disclosures that have recently come out, and people are questioning, like, is this real, is this not real? Having those communities and those groups, I think at this point is kind of important.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, I don't watch the news, Morgan, but
that's smart.
But I pick up things along the way from what people are saying, and I followed that whole. It's been an interest for me, the whole UFO scene, but I'm not a big. It's not a big thing for me, sort of thing.
Yeah, and me neither. It's just been kind of it's been on my radar because I'm doing a podcast episode about it for Supernatural Circumstances. But
okay.
it's kind of been on my radar the last few days. But it's interesting though, even in that phenomenon, how these ideas of these different realities were sort of blurring together and being in these different frequencies, and seeing these, like, whether it be a UFO or a fairy or a spirit, or it's all kind of coming together.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
And that was a question I had for you, because just going back to what you were saying about your great-great-grandfather, and you mentioned joy.
Yeah.
And for me, that is a real key to being open to this world. And maybe there are things to be fearful for, but that's not my approach. I'm very sort of open-hearted, wary, but open-hearted. And I think that approach, that joyful approach, inquisitive, it's almost like being childlike, isn't it?
Actually, that's a great example. I always kind of liken it to, being a kid at Christmas, like that feeling on Christmas Eve when you kind of know you're going to wake up to something amazing. And I think, yeah, I mean, we've kind of lost that as a society. I think joy is almost kind of looked at as, well, what the hell do you have to be joyful about? And the problem with that is the fact that it does close us off from this stuff. And, you know, a really great example of this was, there was an experiment done in Toronto in the 1970s called the Philip experiment. And I go back to this experiment quite a bit because I think it's so profound and it's not talked about enough. Because what happened was that Mensa and some of the medical community got together and they decided that they were going to incite paranormal phenomena. They were going to create a consciousness from essentially nothing. And they went on and on for like a year with no results. And it wasn't until they lightened up and started having fun that stuff started to happen. And they repeated this experiment a number of times. This wasn't just a one go and that was it. Like, they repeated this and it had stuff happen every time. And I think it just, again, it sort of goes back to that, like joy and trust, coming back to those core fundamentals. I was in a hotel in Vancouver. This was a couple of years back. And it was a really sort of well-known haunted hotel. And we hadn't really had anything happen. I'd stayed there like a whole bunch of times, never had anything really happen. And then the one night we ended up getting laughing, and it was over something so silly. Like, it was like the mispronunciation of a word, and it was just so funny.
I know this.
And oh yeah, and he was starting to riff on this word and was like creating these scenarios, and the two of us were in tears, like couldn't even breathe. This went on for like 3 hours. And what was interesting though is that what followed it was a whole night full of stuff happening in the room. And it was, he was seeing apparitions, I was seeing stuff that I couldn't explain. We had the doorknobs turn and doors opening on themselves by themselves, and they shouldn't have been. Like all of this stuff just boom, 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 started to go on. And it was, again, like you were saying, like just that reinforcement that it was like, that's what it took. Like, that's what it took. Just took our vibration to raise just a little bit, and then boom, everything started to go on. It was really cool.
And that's why children, I think, have more experiences, because they're just in that kind of no ego, kind of wonder kind of state.
I think so. And I think that's why animals see a lot as well. You know, they're just very much in that kind of open, chilled out, you know, they're one with the moment. They don't really drag stuff, you know, from the day previous. They kind of live in the moment, and their natural state is that joy and contentment. And I think that's why they're receptive too. Nobody's told them that it shouldn't exist. So they're like, oh, okay, well, there's that thing, you know, and they're just really receptive. It's funny, my Python Galen, he's usually, if something's going to happen, even in my house, he's the first one that sees it. And we'll be sitting somewhere together watching TV or something, and all of a sudden you'll just see him, like, he'll sit up and he'll look, and he just gets this kind of almost glazed over look on his face, like he's seeing somebody, and he'll follow whatever it is, like around the room. And then sometimes he'll even go to greet it. He'll go up and he'll be very excited, and he looks at me like, mom, do you see, you know? And I'm like, oh, mommy doesn't see, but I'm like, hi, whoever you are there, you know, thanks for visiting, it's great. But he sees them and he's thrilled, you know, whatever he's seeing, he's thrilled about it. So so that's been really, really cool. But yeah, I think animals and kids, you know, they resonate with that so much easier than adults brains are too busy.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the mindful moments I found, and I've been in that sort of relaxed state, but I've had these experiences. I've had a lot of auditory experiences, and I've been out and about, you know, hearing giggling, I'm in the woods, or fairy music, what I call fairy music. All that kind of thing. So, but that's usually when I've been relaxed, and not expecting anything. And from my research that I've been doing about fairy experiences, people seeing these cottages I was talking about earlier, they're either on holiday and they've not been lived in the area, so it's like something totally unexpected, and they're obviously in a holiday kind of state of mind, perhaps. So that kind of links with that idea, doesn't it, of being not expecting anything and just being in a relaxed state, receptive state.
Well, and it's backed up too, even statistically in studies, like Gansfeld studies and things like that, where people that are more open, that are a little bit more outgoing, are more accepting. You know, in a lot of the parapsychology experiments, where a person is, you know, goes into a meditation, and there's a person in the other room who, you know, focuses on an image and focuses on sending that person the image, and then they receive the image and things like that. The people who do better at the Gansfeld tests are people that are more open, that are happier, that can get into that meditative state a lot easier. They tend to be more optimistic. It's interesting because there are traits, like personality traits, that you can kind of tie back to how these people are doing what they're doing. And, you know, is it a complete explanation? No, but at the same time, these are traits that have been observed over the years. So I think, you know, if you've got sort of a consistent history as to, you know, that joy and, you know, these emotions are tied to what you're getting, you have to take it seriously. You have to look at it. And on that note as well, what I've noticed throughout my investigations is that it also works the opposite way, where if you've got somebody who is, like, you know, in the dregs, and, you know, maybe lives in chronic frustration, is, you know, kind of that black cloud that wanders around the room, or is dealing with trauma, like legitimate trauma, you will get energies that reflect that trauma, and the hauntings are awful. So, but
Mm.
they're always that reflection. There's always a reflection back, and it's really, really interesting. And
Yeah.
it used to drive people crazy because they'd ask me, they'd say, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do. Can you like bless my
Mm.
house? Can you get rid of this?" And no, it
Mm.
doesn't work like that. You have to do the work. If you
Mm.
move, you're going to be in this situation again in your next house.
Mm.
So you're going to have to change. It has to come from the inside out. So we see that
Yeah.
all over.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I can relate to that experience going through a difficult time in my
Oh,
life.
myself
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So I'd love to hear about any of your experiences that you've had,
Oh gosh, yeah.
Morgan.
There's been so many, and there's been a lot that have been really impactful
Mm.
um, over the years. I think some of the best have been through meditation and sort of connecting with that non-physical side, and sort of learning some of those messages from non-physical through tools like the Ouija board, through tools like meditation, trance mediumship, that kind of a thing. Learning about myself, how to do this stuff.
Mm.
And so that's been pretty cool. The dogman experiences are definitely high on my list.
Yeah.
Those have been amazing.
Oh,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, I think they get a bad rap. I
Mm.
really think they get a bad rap. It's funny because you talk to people, especially in the West here, and everybody says they're terrible and they're evil and whatever. And I've
Mm.
never had an experience where that's been the case. And so that's been a really fascinating thing. And that was one of the experiences that really shifted my opinion about all of these things being flesh and blood creatures as well. Like you run into those guys and you realize really fast that it's like these aren't flesh and blood. These are something else, but they're real, and they're just as real as anything else. But man, they
Mm.
sit on this spectrum of non-physical energy. That's a spectrum. We're on the
Yeah.
spectrum, they're on the spectrum, and it's pretty wild. But I'll never forget them. They were very special to me.
Yeah. Could you share one of those, Celine, and
Yeah,
how you experience them and what your ideas about, where these beings come from? Because I'm interested in that sort of liminality
yeah.
and with fairies and where they come from and how they live on the edges of our reality. This is what folklore says, that they're in the in between places.
Yeah, and I don't think that's wrong. Like you brought up a good point
Mm.
there with folklore, is that I interviewed for Supernatural Circumstances a friend of mine, Dr. Lynn McNeil, and she's a folklorist out of one of the universities in the States. And it was interesting what she said to me, I will never ever forget, and I ended up writing about it in my book, which is that folklore can be true, it can be false, but it always gets something right. And I'll
Yes.
never forget it
Mm.
because it changed how I look at some of this stuff. That it's not okay, well, that's not real or that is real. No, no, no. They might have a story around it, but there's something in there that's a real experience. And the dogmen they came into my life in kind of a funny way. Through people that I knew on the south side of Alberta, and I kind of went into it just not knowing what to think. I mean, the only stories that I'd ever heard about before this was the Beast of Bray Road, which was in Wisconsin.
Mm.
And a friend of mine is one of the lead investigators right now on that case, Eric
Mm.
Mattel, and all of his stories about running into this thing had been really positive. Like there was never a sign of being attacked. I mean, you get growled at, but there was no sign of anybody ever getting hurt. And I mean, this thing had been seen since 1932.
Mm.
So I had no reason whatsoever to think that there was a danger here. So I kind of went into it that way. And throughout the years of investigating this thing, I ended up, I think probably the most profound experiences that I had was like every time I would go out, the people that were with me and we'd kind of we'd invite them in a very peaceful way and say, you know what, we just love to have you. We would just love to have you, and if you feel like spending time with us, that would be great. And it wasn't long before what everybody had been seeing in this area would show up.
Mm.
And we began to realize really, really quickly that intention setting was something that was very much being responded to.
Yeah.
And, we weren't sitting there expecting them, oh, they're understanding English and we're talking, we weren't expecting that, but we were like, whether animals, no matter what level of non-physical they're on, understand that intention. They're reading your energy all the time. And so I was like, if I can approach it like that, then let's see what happens. And probably the best experience I had, but this was kind of late into the research, was we were all standing on a pathway that kind of led into sort of a gully, and then there was woods. And
Mm.
we saw, because the indicator for them showing up were these bright glowing eyes. And when I mean glowing, I mean like Christmas lights. Like it wasn't eye shine, it was like Christmas lights. um and we saw them pop up, and you saw these guys stand up, and when they stand up, they're really big. And he stood up and he was kind of looking at us, and he was looking at me, and I realized, I'm like, okay, like I've asked him, I better follow through with what I've said.
Mm.
So I kind of stepped forward and I just started talking to him, and I was like, it's really great to see you, it's really great to have you here, I really appreciate you coming. And lo and behold, he started to walk towards us.
Mm.
And I got to see this very sort of, I guess, the glimmer around the light of his eyes started to light up parts of his face.
Mm.
And it was this gray fur. I mean, it was a beautiful face. I was looking at the face of what you consider like a wolf, like a black and gray kind of wolf. It's like stunningly beautiful. And he never let go eye contact. Like every once in a while you'd see a blink, but it was like he never let go eye contact. And then a dog from another property barked and he ran. and he heard the dog, and then it was like, and they were gone. But it was so, I would never forget it as long as I live. Hands down, one of the top experiences I've ever had. And I never got the feeling I was under threat. I never got the feeling like, oh my God, this thing's gonna kill me. There was definitely a feeling of, you better respect this. You know, in the same way that if, you know, you're watching a bear from a distance, it's like, you know, you're not going to, you know, go running up and give it a hug. But at the same time, I found it just profound. And after that, you know, everybody that was saying, you know, well, I saw this or I saw that. Well, you know what? Maybe you did. I don't know. I just saw this thing. So who am I to judge at this point?
Yeah, and that connection. I mean, how did
Yeah.
that feel to be in his
It was like
presence?
an energy of something to be respected, deeply respected. It felt old. The energy felt very old, and there was a wisdom, like there was a wisdom there, and I can't explain it. Like, I mean, it's not like we were having a conversation. I know some people say that they've had sort of these telepathic interactions with these things. I haven't, but there was an absolute understanding there, and I definitely felt like it was understanding everything, like way more than what I was probably giving off. Like it was really understanding everything. So I don't know, like I don't know what these things are. I don't know where they come from. I have no idea, but I can tell you, like, I mean, what I saw was definitely not Canadian wildlife. You know, that was for sure. It was not a moose. It was not a bear. It was not, yeah, it was none of those things. This was something else. And it was really, really, really cool. So yeah, so that was one of my favorite things.
Like a higher intelligence. Did you feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like old intelligence. Like,
Yeah.
that's the best way I can describe it. Like if you were, you know, if you were to, I don't know, sit down with an ancient presence, like, you know, somebody that, you know, is kind of a master of themselves and a master of the environment. Like it was, you know, I won't want to use the term deity, but that's kind of how it felt. Like you just kind of wanted to sit down, and it's like, whatever you have to say, I'm willing to listen. Just, it was, yeah, just deep, profound respect. So I think there's something to these guys, these, you know, whether it be the Beast of Bray Road or the Michigan Dogman or whatever, but like there's something very wild about them, something very feral about them. But at the same time, like there's a lot of intelligence there, in my opinion.
Yeah. And how did your life? I mean, did you notice any changes after having this encounter? Because quite often people have these encounters, and then there's a life change. They kind of come to a crossroads. And did anything change in your
Yeah,
life? So,
I think just I wouldn't say like nothing physically changed, but the drive to understand what I'd seen and what I'd experienced and to see him again has not gone away.
yeah.
That's the one thing. Like I definitely felt that connection, because that was just one of many experiences I had with him, and that has not gone away. I have a group of colleagues now that I go out with, because we found a new space where these guys seem to be hanging out, and we've been there a number of times now, and experienced them again. Not quite as clear or as close, but you know they're there, and you know you'll see them, but it'll be kind of like from a distance. So just continually to go back, except it's a long way out of the city from where I live. It's quite a distance, so it's not like you can go there every night, but and sometimes you don't see them at all. So there is that too. I mean, that you don't control them by any stretch, but it's just this drive to know who they are, what they are, and their willingness to connect. I mean, they show up, they're there. So it's like, what are they, you know, what do they want out of this interaction? You know, I want to know that too. So I mean, I don't know where it'll go, but it's definitely I mean, out of the 20 plus years I've been doing this, hands down one of the highlights.
Wow. And like you say, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? Because it's like people having fairy experiences. I mean, I would kind of class that maybe as a fairy experience if we're looking at a big umbrella of these beings. Maybe I'd include that kind of experience under that umbrella. But yeah, what is it that these beings are wanting from us by showing themselves? Because they don't have to, do they? They can
Yeah.
be invisible if they want to. Why are they showing themselves to certain people? And also, what interests me is, why are certain people having experiences with certain beings? So is it because they're interested in them? People that go out looking for the Sasquatch or the Dogmen or ghosts or whatever it is, fairies. Is it because we're focusing on them, or is it because they, what's going on? Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, I've got a couple, and I think there's a cryptozoologist who studied in the Sierra Mountains, Ron Moorhead, and he has said something over the years that it stuck with me, and that is because he primarily researches Sasquatch, and he said, one of the best things that you can do is just go out into these spaces, like into these hot spots, and just be. Don't expect anything to happen. Just be present. And what I found really interesting about that is that has worked for me. You know, I think sometimes when we go out and we're looking, what happens is that the universe kind of delivers what we're putting out there. You know, if we're looking, then we're aware of their absence. And when we're aware of something's absence, we kind of generate their absence, more of their absence. You know, if we're going out and we're focused on, well, I don't see them yet, but I will see them. Well, what are you focused on? Well, you're focused on the fact that you can't see them. So you don't have these experiences. And I think a lot of the time, these investigators that are going out and they're saying like, you know, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find Bigfoot, and they come back with nothing. But yet you have people that are out there that will go hiking, or, you know, they're in just a good state of mind, or they're, you know, they're out doing their job. You know, whether they're logging or, you know, they're doing some sort of mindless task, and then all of a sudden they look up and they go, oh my God, you know, I just, this Bigfoot stepped out from the woods, and, you know, she had her baby, and I had this moment, and it was amazing. But it's very rarely is it people that are out deliberately looking for anything. And I think Ron Moore had hit it on the head when he said you have to learn how to just be, let go of the expectation, set the intention, set that positive intention that you're just open and just go and see. Because it's like, I think the idea that we can kind of do this on demand and that we're just going to find, you know, whatever it is really discounting the intelligence of what we're dealing with. You know, these things seem to be so intuitive and so mindful. And, you know, I think they know when they're going to get exploited. I think they know when there's going to be a mockery made of them in some way, or if there's a camera and, you know, people are out there with their cameras and whatever. And it's like, you know, apart from the fact that I really believe these guys can see infrared on a camera, I don't think you're going to hide a trail cam that they're going to see. They can probably hear them, the motors running. But at the same time, I'm like, these guys, they're aware. There's some smarts there. And yeah, again, two-way street.
Yeah, that's definitely, again, reflecting my experience as well. With not the first very experience, but when I first stepped onto this path with a intention that this is where I was going to go, I was like, okay, I'm getting the message that I need to be focusing on you guys. And that's when the doorway opened, so to speak. And, you know, these beings were stepping forward in various ways. So yeah, it's about, and like you say, they will scan you, won't they, and check you out and think, well, is this person going to exploit me? Why are they doing this? Because it comes back to that idea of intention again, and checking in with ourselves. Why are we doing this? Why are we wanting to connect with these beings? And but it'd be interesting to know, wouldn't it? Why do they want to connect with us?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know whether it's maybe to you know, expand our own awareness, expand our, you know, expand their awareness of us. You know, I don't know, but I definitely get the feeling that they're here, and they're a lot brighter than what we give them credit for. So I know the experience that I had, I definitely did not feel that I had anything to teach him. I wasn't standing there going, I'm the superior thing that's, you know, and I'm going to bestow my knowledge on, you know, this creature with his bright eyes. Like, I just, none of that at all. It was, I keep going, I go back to this all the time in interviews and stuff. And I just say it was a privilege. It was a privilege to be there. And I don't know what made me or one of the recipients of this privilege, but it was absolutely, that's all you can say. And I mean, maybe that's what the intention was. It was just, you know, it's a reward, you know, you were kind and you were open, and here's, you know, this is who I am, right? Maybe that was the extent of it. But yeah, as I say, we'll never ever forget it. And as I say, I don't think I was going to you know, bestow on him anything he didn't know by any means.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. It's just wonderful to listen to your experience. And
I love talking about it. I love talking about it because I think it really is. I think it's important with more of these reports of these things coming out, that people realize that these encounters don't have to go south in the way that a lot of them have. And, you know, probably one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen people make as they're sort of explaining their tales and whatever, is the fact that every single one of them runs. And I'm like, you have to remember, wolf and predators, they chase, right? So, and prey runs. So I think one of the reasons why I've had better experiences is that I've never run away. So it's a very different dynamic immediately that I'm kind of developing with what's going on, because I think there are some primal instincts there. But at the same time, you know, I think again, what energy are you projecting? Are you projecting fear? Are you projecting upset? Are you projecting panic? Well, you know, if you project that into a pet dog, what's going to happen? You know, someone's going to walk away with a bite. Like, I don't care how nice your dog is. If you're sitting there and you're fearful of dogs, that dog's going to probably come at you. And I think there's that dynamic going on as well. What are people projecting? Projecting fear? Well, that's what's going to come back at you in life.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
And there's also the element of, well, we are in their territory. So
completely. And they absolutely run the show. I mean, when you're out there and you're in the woods and you're in the dark and there, you got nothing. Like, we're going to trip on a root and be on our face in 2 seconds. I mean, we have the upper hand out there, right? But it's respecting. And that was one of the ways that I wanted to go out into these situations was, you know, this isn't my space. This is not my space. If you want me to go, I'll go. That's no problem. But, you know, I'd love to have an interaction with you if you're there. If you don't want to, that's okay too.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of my approach too.
I think that's all we've got. I think that's the problem.
It's like, I know we are. We kind of think of ourselves as invincible and what people do, but yeah, we are these. You know, we're just like a bag flesh and bones. That's quite wonderful, really. So.
Yeah, you realize that real fast when you hear something jump out of a tree and land on the, and something, and you're like, oh, okay, like that's great. I've had that happen a couple times where I've been, out and whatnot. You hear them and you think, okay, you know that they're there, and then all of a sudden you hear this crunch on behind, 10 feet behind you, and you realize, oh, he's been watching the whole time from somewhere else. And it's just like, you realize real fast that it's like, you don't have a shot if this goes badly. But I don't think that's what they're out there for. There's, as far as I know, there's never been any sort of really violent uproarious events or anything like that around these guys. And I think you can have any encounter go badly, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah, I think they've got much more reason to be scared of us, actually. I mean, we are the ones to be fearful of.
Yeah, well, again, it comes back to that exploitation. I don't think we're going to go out there with a gun and shoot one. I mean, I don't think that's possible. But at the same time, having their territory invaded by a pile of cameras, I mean, that's not fun. Having that kind of balance upset, that because I really think that they thrive on that balance. And whatnot. And maybe it's just because I have a python, and a lot of people are really afraid of snakes. And I think I've always taken that approach to people that feel that way about snakes too, where I'm like, I have a wonderful little boy. Like he just turned 19. He's kind, he's sweet, he's empathetic, he's loving, he's never bitten a soul. Like he's such a doll. And he's like my best friend. He's amazing. And and I kind of I guess I kind of took that same approach to these guys, where I was just like, people got a lot of ideas about snakes too, and most of them are wrong. So like, I'm willing to sort of step up and learn and see what these guys are really about.
Wonderful. And I'm really interested in your teaching as well, Morgan, because you're a wonderful teacher. And I saw a little bit about the shows that you've been doing. And because I'm interested in history and sharing history with people, I'm also interested in folk. I bought a folklore map recently,
Cool.
which is fantastic. Dartmoor by a local artist. And it's got all of the haunted houses, all of the
Nice.
pixie places, all that kind of thing. And I see that you do like a walking classroom.
Yeah.
In Canada.
Yeah, it's really fun. And I kind of usually now I'm doing kind of private bookings and stuff like that, but I've got 2 coming up. If anybody sees this before the Edmonton Expo in Edmonton, Alberta, you guys can join me on a couple of tours there. But yeah, I don't like to call them ghost tours, because I like them to be this sort of immersive classroom where we're going to these places, we're walking from place to place, but every single stop isn't just about a place that I've investigated. It's about, this is why it applies, and this is what you can learn in terms of techniques. This is what this means for you. This is what these types of hauntings can present like. This is how. So instead of it being like, well, I'm just going to tell you about the history of this building, and I heard a couple of cool ghost stories. No. Like, by the end of this, you're going to walk away feeling like you've got some understanding and empowerment behind this information. It's not going to be, oh, I just heard this cool story one time. And so all the classes that I do are designed like that, where, even I do a lot of stage shows and theater shows and stuff as well, that are all the same way. Like I did one at the arena here in Edmonton last September, and I'll be doing it again this year. And it's all about cryptids, and we go through the world and start examining these cases. Let's talk about this, and in a really fun way that ties it back into things like film and television, so that people can see, like, Lord of the Rings, how much truth is there to the creatures like the Hobbit, dragons, this kind of thing. Where does this come from? Why do we, why are we so attached to these things in our culture? So each one of these classes is kind of designed that way, and whatnot, and they're great. Like, they're really fun to do, and I think people get a lot out of them.
If I was living near you, I'd be coming along on those tours.
That would be great.
I love that. Oh my God, I just wish you were closer, Morgan.
I keep telling people, I'm like, find me a venue where you are and I will be there. So I was like, call me, just a venue, call me, because I do travel. So
wonderful. Yeah, you'll have to come and check out Dartmoor, and
that would be very cool.
Be amazing. So I'd love to hear about what you've got coming up and where people can contact you and connect with you. So you've got loads going on. Yeah.
Tons of stuff on the go right now. The biggest being some of the live shows that are coming up for fall. Those are going to be on my website at entityseeker.ca, and you can get everything there. So my books are there, all my videos are there, interviews are updated there. I mean, it's a one-stop shop. All my social media is there. Entityseeker.ca, you'll have everything. And then Supernatural Circumstances is my podcast with the amazing Mike Brown, who most Canadians will know from the true crime podcast Dark Poutine. And he and I take this approach, and we start looking at cases in a new way. We don't just tell spooky stories. We delve into the how, the why, the psychology behind some of these cases, and we have guests on from just a gamut of different fields: academia, folklorists, professors, researchers, everything. And we kind of break down some of this stuff as best we can, so people have a real understanding of what that is. And they can download that on any podcast platform: Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, Apple, and you can go and learn more at supernaturalcircumstances.com.
Yeah, I've just recently started listening to your podcast, and it is amazing. It's
Oh,
like
thank you.
on my podcast list now to
I'm
listen to
glad.
episodes. I love the one I've just been listening to, the one about the face eaters.
Yes.
Just another amazing.
Incredible. And just north of me too. So that's never good. But yeah, the Gugwit is he's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah, everyone listen to Morgan's podcast. It's amazing, and you'll learn. I mean, I'm already learning new things that I've never heard about before. So
That me too.
yeah,
Every time I do an episode, it's unbelievable. Mike and I are always left after the calls going, like, I had no idea that was a thing. I mean, we bring our expertise to the table, but man, I think we learn more than I think we learn more than we put out half the time. So it's pretty good.
it's great though. That's what's so good about this community, isn't it? Meeting people, talking to them, think, oh my gosh, that's something else I hadn't thought about.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's so important, because when you start comparing your experiences a little bit, then you start to fit some of these puzzle pieces together, which I think is really important. It's important for everybody to begin to start to understand, what is it that we are a part of in this world, because we're a part of it. We're not witnessing it. We are one of these spiritual beings within it. And it's like understanding our role and understanding the role of what's around us. And when we can have a little bit more of that, I think that's a good thing.
Thank you, Morgan. That's a really lovely note to finish our chat on.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you ever so much for your time today. And yeah, you mentioned an event that's coming up. Can I put links to that in?
Yeah, absolutely. On my website, you'll be able to find all the info.
Yeah.
A lot of it comes out tomorrow, but that will be already done by the time this airs. So it'll probably already be available on entityseeker.ca. So all of that will be there under events.
Thank you, Morgan. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Say goodbye now.